My sister rolled down her window at my college graduation, laughed at my beat-up Toyota, and sped off in her brand-new Mercedes. But 3 hours later, she was the one sitting in stunned silence when the university president called my name to unveil something she never saw coming. What could make someone who mocked you their entire life suddenly go pale and speechless? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the parking lot of Riverside University as I adjusted my graduation cap one more time. My royal blue gown clung to my shoulders, already damp with sweat despite it being only 9 in the morning. Around me, hundreds of graduates buzzed with excitement, their families snapping photos and shouting congratulations. I stood alone next to my 2008 Toyota Corolla, its faded silver paint job telling the story of every penny I'd scraped together over the past 4 years. The passenger side door required a specific technique to open: lift the handle twice, then pull hard, a quirk I'd grown oddly fond of. The air conditioning had died 2 summers ago, and I'd learned to live with it. The back bumper held together with duct tape and determination. But it was mine. Paid for with my own money from working double shifts at Morrison's Diner on Route 45. I checked my phone. Mom had texted an hour ago. "Running late, sweetie. Your father's physical therapy ran over. We'll be there soon. So proud of you." Dad's stroke 18 months ago had changed everything. What little savings my parents had evaporated into medical bills and rehabilitation costs. They'd wanted to help with school, but I wouldn't let them. Not when Dad needed special equipment at home. Not when Mom had taken a leave of absence from her job as a school secretary to care for him full-time. A horn blared across the parking lot, sharp and aggressive. I knew that sound. A champagne-colored Mercedes C-Class weaved through the rows of cars, its paint gleaming like liquid gold under the harsh sunlight. My sister Vanessa rolled down the window, oversized Gucci sunglasses perched on her nose. Her honey blonde highlights, fresh from a salon that charged more for one appointment than I spent on groceries in a month, caught the light perfectly. "Well, well," Vanessa called out, her voice dripping with that particular condescension she'd perfected over 26 years. "Still driving that piece of junk, Amelia? I thought maybe you'd have upgraded by now." "Oh, wait," she laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the morning air. "You probably spent all your money on that fancy degree, right? How very practical." Her fiancé, Bradley Chen, sat in the passenger seat looking uncomfortable. He offered me a weak smile but said nothing. He never did. "The car runs fine," I replied evenly, refusing to take the bait. I'd learned years ago that reacting to Vanessa only fed her need for drama. "Just fine?" Vanessa pushed her sunglasses up, her green eyes, the same shade as mine, though we looked nothing else alike, scanning my Corolla with theatrical disgust. "Amelia, Bradley just bought me this Mercedes last month, for my promotion at Westfield Marketing. You know, the job I got right out of college, the one with the actual salary?" She emphasized those last 3 words like tiny daggers. I bit the inside of my cheek. Vanessa had attended Claremont College, a private school where our aunt and uncle had paid her full tuition. She'd graduated with a business degree, decent grades, and 0 student debt. She'd walked into her job through a connection our uncle had at his firm. Her life had been paved with golden bricks while I'd been laying my own path one stone at a time. "Congratulations on the car," I said quietly. "It's beautiful." "Oh, don't be modest about your little Honda." "Oh my God, it's not even a Honda. It's a Toyota." Vanessa laughed again, louder this time, as if she'd just delivered the punchline to the world's funniest joke. "Even worse. Anyway, we can't stay long. We just came to make an appearance for Mom and Dad. Bradley has a golf thing at the country club at 2. "It's actually at 3, Bradley mumbled, but Vanessa ignored him. "Where are they anyway?" Vanessa glanced around, her patience already wearing thin. "Typical, late to everything." "Dad's physical therapy ran late," I explained. defensive instincts kicking in despite my better judgment. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively, her engagement ring, 3 carats, princess cut, purchased by Bradley's, family money, catching the sunlight and throwing tiny rainbows across her dashboard. Right. The stroke thing. Well, I'm sure they'll show up eventually. They wouldn't miss their little scholarship baby's big day. Scholarship baby. She'd been calling me that since I'd received the Riverside University Merit Scholarship 4 years ago, a full ride that covered tuition, housing, and books. Vanessa had somehow twisted my achievement into something shameful, as if needing financial assistance was a character flaw rather than a reality millions of students faced. Listen, we need to get going and find decent seats, Vanessa continued, already rolling up her window. I swear, if we're stuck behind some giant family with those annoying air horns, I'm leaving. Oh, and Amelia? She paused, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. Try not to trip when you walk across the stage, okay? I'd hate for your big moment to end up on someone's viral video. The Mercedes pulled away before I could respond, leaving behind a faint trace of expensive perfume mixed with exhaust fumes. I stood there for a moment, letting the familiar weight of inadequacy settle over my shoulders like an old jacket. This was Vanessa's specialty, making me feel small in 60 seconds or less. She'd been doing it our entire lives. When I made the honor roll in middle school, she'd pointed out that she'd been on the honor roll all 4 years of high school. When I got my driver's license, she'd reminded everyone she'd gotten hers on the first try while I'd needed 2 attempts. When I'd been accepted to Riverside University, she'd made sure to mention, repeatedly, that Claremont College was ranked 40 spots higher in U.S. News. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough to exist in its own light. It always had to be, measured against Vanessa's accomplishments and found wanting. My phone buzzed. Mom again. Just parked. We see you, baby girl. I looked up to see my parents making their way through the parking lot. Dad moved slowly with his cane, his left side still weaker than his right, but his face broke into the widest smile when he saw me. Mom walked beside him, one hand ready to steady him if needed, her eyes already glistening with tears. There's our graduate, Dad called out, his speech slightly slurred but understandable. He'd worked so hard in therapy to get it back. I walked toward them, my throat tight with emotion. As I hugged them both, I felt Dad's trembling hand pat my back. So proud, he whispered. So damn proud of you, mija. In that moment, standing in a hot parking lot in my wrinkled graduation gown next to my ancient Toyota, I felt rich in ways Vanessa's Mercedes could never buy. But neither of us knew what was coming in 3 hours. Neither of us had any idea that this graduation would change everything. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The stadium seats were filling up fast by the time we made our way to the ceremony grounds. Riverside University's outdoor amphitheater could hold 15,000 people, and from the looks of the crowd streaming through the gates, we'd hit capacity. The class of 2025 was the largest in the university's history, over 3,000 graduates. Mom held Dad's arm as we navigated the crowds. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but he refused to complain. He'd been looking forward to this day for 4 years, marking it on the calendar in the kitchen with a gold star. You need to get to the staging area, Mom said, checking her phone. They said graduates should be lined up by 9:45. It's 9:30 now. I nodded, adjusting the honor cords around my neck. Gold for summa cum laude, purple for the Engineering Honor Society, and blue for the Chancellor's Leadership Award. They felt heavier than they should, weighted with 4 years of sleepless nights, skipped meals, and sacrifices I'd never tell my parents about. I'll see you after, I said, hugging them both one more time. We'll be in Section C, Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. Row 12. We'll be cheering so loud you'll hear us from the stage. As I walked toward the graduate assembly area, I passed clusters of families taking photos. Designer handbags, expensive cameras, balloons with custom printing. The wealth at Riverside University had always been obvious, but never more so than today. This was a school where luxury cars filled the student parking lots, where some kids treated their education like a 4-year vacation funded by trust funds. I'd never fit into that world. While my classmates had spent spring breaks in Cancun, I'd picked up extra shifts. While they'd joined Greek life and attended formals, I'd been in the library until midnight, then back to my dorm to work on freelance coding projects that paid for my groceries. While they'd complained about meal plan food, I'd been rationing ramen and learning to cook dried beans in a microwave. But I'd made it. Despite everything, I'd made it. Amelia Hernandez? I turned to find Dr. Patricia Nguyen, the Dean of Engineering, walking toward me with a warm smile. She wore her academic regalia, the doctoral hood draped over her shoulders in Yale's blue and white colors. Dean Nguyen, I said, slightly surprised. I didn't expect to see you here in the staging area. I wanted to catch you before the ceremony started, she said, her eyes twinkling with something I couldn't quite read. I need you to sit in a specific section today. Row 3, seat 7. Can you remember that? Row 3, seat 7, I repeated, confused. Is everything okay? Everything is perfect, Dr. Nguyen said. Just trust me on this one. And Amelia. She paused, placing a hand on my shoulder. I know these past 4 years haven't been easy for you. What you've accomplished, it's extraordinary. I hope you know that. Before I could respond, she disappeared into the crowd of faculty members gathering near the stage. The processional music started at exactly 10 o'clock. Pomp and circumstance. The classic graduation march that somehow never got old. We filed in by college, the engineering graduates toward the front. I found row 3 and counted over to seat 7, sliding in between 2 classmates I vaguely recognized from my thermodynamics class. The stadium erupted in cheers as we filled the seats. I scanned the crowd, trying to spot my parents in section C, but there were too many people. Somewhere out there, Mom was probably crying. Dad was probably telling everyone around them about his daughter, the engineer, and somewhere, Vanessa was probably checking her phone, bored already. The university president, Dr. Marcus Aldridge, took the podium. He was a tall man in his early 60s with silver hair and the commanding presence of someone who'd spent decades in academia. His speech hit all the expected notes: the future ahead, the challenges we'd overcome, the promise we held as graduates entering the world. I'd heard Dr. Aldridge speak a dozen times over the past 4 years. He'd given the welcome address at freshman orientation, appeared at various campus events, sent university-wide emails about everything from academic excellence to parking policy updates. But I'd never interacted with him directly. Presidents of major universities didn't typically cross paths with scholarship students who kept their heads down and focused on surviving. Before we begin conferring degrees, Dr. Aldridge said, his voice booming through the sound system, I have a very special announcement to make. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't part of the printed program. Riverside University has been blessed with an extraordinary gift, he continued. A donation that will transform our engineering program and provide opportunities for generations of students to come. My classmates shifted in their seats, interested now. Large donations weren't uncommon at Riverside. The campus was dotted with buildings bearing the names of wealthy benefactors. The business school was named after a tech CEO who donated $50 million. The athletics complex honored a former NFL player who'd contributed $30 million. This gift comes not from a wealthy alumnus or a corporate foundation, Dr. Aldridge said, his voice taking on a tone of genuine admiration. It comes from someone who understands, intimately, what it means to struggle for an education. Someone who worked multiple jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA. Someone who turned down a lucrative job offer to pursue something bigger. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair. 4 years ago, this person developed an algorithm during their sophomore year, a machine learning application that revolutionized supply chain logistics. They sold that patent to a Fortune 500 company, but instead of keeping the money, they invested it. They grew it. And now, they've chosen to give back. The stadium had gone completely silent. 15,000 people holding their collective breath. The donation is $42 million, Dr. Aldridge announced. The crowd gasped. Even by Riverside standards, that was massive. This gift will fund a new state-of-the-art engineering facility, complete with research labs, makerspaces, and innovation centers. It will also establish a permanent endowment for first-generation college students who need financial support. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. Dr. Aldridge paused, looking directly at our section. The donor is sitting among us today, a member of the class of 2025. My heart hammered against my ribs. The two classmates next to me had gone rigid, probably wondering if they somehow knew the mystery donor. I'd like to invite to the stage the person whose generosity will change countless lives, Dr. Aldridge said, pulling a note card from his pocket and reading the name I'd heard my entire life. The name that had been on every scholarship application, every job form, every document that defined my existence. Amelia Sophia Hernandez. For 3 full seconds, I couldn't move. My brain refused to process the sound of my name echoing through the stadium's speakers, bouncing off the walls, reaching 15,000 pairs of ears. Then the applause started, a deafening roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Dr. Nguyen appeared at the end of my row, smiling broadly, gesturing for me to stand. My legs felt disconnected from my body as I rose. The students around me were staring, some with their mouths open, others clapping enthusiastically. I walked toward the aisle on shaking legs, my mind reeling. Somewhere in Section C, row 12, my parents were probably losing their minds, and somewhere else in this stadium, Vanessa had just heard my name called out as the donor of $42 million, the same Vanessa who'd mocked my beat-up Toyota 3 hours ago. I climbed the steps to the stage, each one feeling surreal, as Dr. Aldridge extended his hand toward me with a smile that suggested he knew exactly what kind of bomb he'd just dropped on my family. Dr. Aldridge's handshake was firm, grounding me back into reality. The applause continued to thunder around us as he guided me to the center of the stage. From this vantage point, I could see the entire stadium, a sea of faces, phones raised to capture the moment, and somewhere in that crowd, my family processing what they'd just heard. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Aldridge spoke into the microphone, waiting for the applause to die down. What makes Miss Hernandez's contribution even more remarkable is the story behind it. "Amelia, would you mind sharing with everyone here how this came to be?" He handed me the microphone. My hand trembled as I took it. I'd given presentations before. I'd defended my senior thesis in front of a panel of professors. I'd pitched project ideas to potential investors. But standing in front of 15,000 people, admitting the truth about something I'd kept secret for 2 years, that was different. "I never planned for any of this to become public," I started, my voice sounding strange through the speakers. 2 years ago, during my sophomore year, I was working the night shift at Morrison's Diner on Route 45. Between serving tables and studying, I noticed how the restaurant struggled with inventory management. Food spoiled before it could be used. Orders came in late or in wrong quantities. It was costing them thousands of dollars a month. A few people in the crowd nodded, probably other students who'd worked service jobs and seen the same problems. I thought I could build something to help. A predictive algorithm that analyzed patterns, seasonal trends, weather data, local events, to forecast demand accurately. I worked on it for 6 months, teaching myself machine learning frameworks between shifts and classes. The diner owner, Mr. Morrison, let me implement it as a test. I paused, remembering those exhausting months. The code that wouldn't compile at 3 in the morning. The statistical models that kept producing garbage results until I finally found the right approach. The triumph of seeing it actually work. Within 3 months, the diner cut food waste by 67%. Mr. Morrison saved enough money to give his employees their first raise in 4 years. Word spread to other small businesses in the area, and I refined the algorithm to work for different types of retail operations. Then a supply chain consultant noticed what I'd built and connected me with executives at Meridian Logistics. The name Meridian Logistics drew another murmur from the crowd. It was one of the largest supply chain companies in North America, managing logistics for major retailers across the continent. They saw potential for the algorithm at a massive scale. After 6 months of negotiations and working with their legal team, while still taking a full course load and working at the diner, we reached an agreement. They purchased the patent for $8 million. The number hung in the air. I heard scattered gasps throughout the stadium. I was 20 years old. I'd never had more than $800 in my bank account at one time. Suddenly, I had more money than I knew what to do with. My first instinct was to pay off my parents' medical debt from my father's stroke. The second was to make sure I could finish school without working 3 jobs simultaneously. In the crowd, I finally spotted my parents. Mom had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Dad sat perfectly still, his cane across his lap, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. But I kept thinking about all the students I'd met at Riverside. Brilliant people who worked full-time while taking classes. People who chose their courses based on which textbooks they could afford rather than which subjects interested them. People who skipped meals so they could buy lab supplies. I'd been one of those people for 2 years before the algorithm changed my life. My voice grew stronger, fueled by the memory of every hungry night. Every time I'd calculated whether I could afford both laundry detergent and groceries that week, so I invested the money. I worked with financial advisors, learning everything I could about wealth management while taking engineering courses. The market was good to me. 8 million became 15, then 25, then 40. And I made a decision. When I graduated, I would give it back. Not to pay for buildings with my name on them, but to make sure other students wouldn't have to choose between education and survival. The applause started again. Building like a wave, Dr. Aldridge stepped forward, smiling broadly. The new engineering facility will be called the Hernandez Innovation Center, he announced, and the scholarship endowment will provide full-ride scholarships to 50 first-generation college students every year, in perpetuity. Miss Hernandez has quite literally changed the future of this university. As I walked back to my seat, my legs still shaky, my mind couldn't stop racing. The ceremony continued, the conferring of degrees, the moving of tassels, the official declarations that made us all graduates. But I barely registered any of it. My phone, silenced in my pocket, was undoubtedly exploding with messages. When they finally called the engineering graduates to receive our diplomas, I walked across that stage a second time. Dr. Nguyen handed me my diploma with a knowing smile and a whisper. "You've made us all incredibly proud." The ceremony ended with the traditional throwing of caps into the air. Mine sailed up with thousands of others, a moment of pure joy and relief that we'd all made it through. As graduates flooded toward their families, I was immediately swarmed by classmates I'd barely spoken to in 4 years. "Amelia, that's insane. You never mentioned any of this. Can I add you on LinkedIn?" I smiled politely, extracting myself as gracefully as I could, searching the crowd for my parents. And for Vanessa, I found Mom and Dad first. Mom grabbed me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe, sobbing into my shoulder. "Why didn't you tell us?" she kept saying. "Mia, why didn't you say anything?" I wanted it to be a surprise, I managed, though that wasn't entirely true. Part of me had been terrified of what having money might change, of how it might shift the dynamics in our family, of becoming someone I didn't recognize. Dad said nothing. He just pulled me close with his good arm and held on. "There she is." Vanessa's voice cut through the crowd noise like a blade. I turned to find her standing 5 feet away, Bradley hovering uncertainly behind her. Her face had gone completely pale, 2 spots of red high on her cheeks. Fury or embarrassment, I couldn't tell which. "So," she said, her voice tight, "you're rich." The word hung between us, loaded with everything unsaid in our entire relationship. "I made a donation," I replied carefully. "That's not the same thing." $42 million. Vanessa's laugh was hollow, bitter. "You had $42 million and you've been driving that piece of shit Toyota? You've been pretending to be poor?" "I wasn't pretending anything, Vanessa. I never lied to you. You just conveniently forgot to mention you're a multimillionaire." Her voice rose, drawing attention from nearby families. All this time letting me think, letting everyone think. She cut herself off, but I knew what she'd been about to say. Letting everyone think I was less than her. Letting her maintain the illusion that she was the successful one, the one who'd made it, while I struggled behind. Bradley touched her arm. "Van, maybe we should—" "Don't," she snapped at him, jerking away. She turned back to me, her eyes blazing. "You made me look like an idiot." "I didn't make you do anything," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." The words landed like a slap. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For once in her life, she had nothing to say. She turned on her heel and stormed off, Bradley trailing behind with an apologetic glance back at me. Mom squeezed my hand. "Don't let her ruin this day." But as I watched my sister disappear into the crowd, I realized something. This wasn't about ruining my day. This was about the moment when everything Vanessa had built her identity on, being the successful one. The rich one, the one with it all together, had shattered in front of thousands of people. And I hadn't done it to hurt her. I'd done it because 50 students every year deserved a chance I almost didn't get. The graduation reception was held in the university's grand ballroom, a space normally reserved for donor galas and academic conferences. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the campus gardens where magnolia trees bloomed in brilliant white clusters. I'd been to this building once before, during freshman orientation, when they'd herded us through on a campus tour. Back then, I'd pressed my nose against the glass doors, peeking at the marble floors and elegant furnishings, never imagining I'd actually set foot inside. Now, everyone wanted to talk to me. Professors I'd never met congratulated me on my vision and generosity. Students asked for advice on startups and patents. University administrators hovered nearby, clearly hoping to discuss future gifts. A reporter from the local news station asked for an interview. Someone from the Alumni Association thrust a business card into my hand and invited me to join the Young Philanthropists Council. It was overwhelming in a way I hadn't anticipated. Mom stayed close, her protective instincts on high alert. Dad had found a chair near the refreshment table, exhausted from the morning's excitement but refusing to leave. Every few minutes, someone would approach him to offer congratulations, and his face would light up with pride. "Miss Hernandez?" I turned to find a woman in her mid-30s, professionally dressed in a charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes conversations. "I'm Rebecca Winters from Catalyst Ventures," she said, extending her hand. "We're a venture capital firm focused on early-stage tech companies. I'd love to discuss potential opportunities with you." "That algorithm you developed, have you considered building a company around it or developing other applications?" I hesitated. "I haven't really thought about it. I've been focused on finishing school, of course. But now that you've graduated, you might want to explore your options. The supply chain optimization space is exploding right now. With your track record, you could easily secure Series A funding." She handed me a card with embossed gold lettering. "Think about it. We'd love to schedule a meeting." As she walked away, Mom leaned in. "What's Series A funding?" "It's when venture capitalists invest in a company to help it grow," I explained, staring at the business card. The address was in San Francisco's financial district. "Are you going to call her?" "I don't know, Mom. I haven't even processed today yet." What I didn't say, the thought of building a company, of managing employees and investors and all the pressures that came with that world, filled me with anxiety. I'd gotten lucky once. The algorithm had worked, and Meridian Logistics had seen its value. But that didn't make me a tech entrepreneur. It made me an engineering student who'd solved a specific problem. Amelia. Dr. Nguyen approached another faculty member I recognized, Dr. James Okafor, who headed the university's entrepreneurship program. "I wanted to introduce you to James," Dr. Nguyen said. "He's been doing incredible work helping students launch startups. Given your experience, I thought you two should connect." Dr. Okafor's handshake was enthusiastic. Your algorithm is exactly the kind of innovation we try to foster in our program. Have you thought about teaching? We're always looking for guest lecturers who can share real-world experience with students. Teaching. That possibility hadn't occurred to me either. I'd be interested in that, I said, surprising myself. I'd need to figure out logistics, but yes, I think I'd enjoy sharing what I learned. Wonderful. Let's set up a time to discuss it properly. Dr. Okafor pulled out his phone. Are you staying in the area after graduation or relocating? That was the question, wasn't it? I had job offers, 3 of them actually. 2 in California, 1 in Austin, all at tech companies with impressive salaries and benefits packages. Before the donation, I'd been planning to take the Austin offer, reasoning that the lower cost of living would let me send more money home to my parents. Now, everything has changed. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. As Dr. Okafor and Dr. Nguyen continued discussing possibilities, I caught sight of Vanessa across the ballroom. She stood with Bradley and a cluster of his family members, his parents, who I'd met once at an awkward dinner, and his younger sister. Vanessa's posture was rigid, her smile forced as she listened to Bradley's mother talk. Our eyes met for a brief second. She looked away immediately. The rejection shouldn't have stung. We'd been on opposite sides of an invisible war our entire lives. But some small part of me, the little sister who'd once idolized her older sibling, still wished things were different. Sweetheart? My Aunt Carmen appeared at my elbow, my Uncle Richard right behind her. They were my mother's sister and brother-in-law, the ones who'd paid for Vanessa's college education. Carmen's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. We had no idea, Carmen said, her voice thick with emotion. Amelia, if we'd known you were struggling financially, we would have helped. We should have helped. It's okay, Tia Carmen. I managed. It's not okay. Uncle Richard shook his head. We assumed because you got the scholarship that everything was covered. We didn't realize. He stopped, looking genuinely distressed. The part-time jobs, the long hours. Your mother mentioned some of it, but we didn't understand the full picture. There was guilt in their faces, and I realized they were thinking about the disparity. They'd given Vanessa everything: tuition, spending money, a car, rent for her apartment. Meanwhile, I'd been scraping by on scholarships and minimum wage jobs. You helped Vanessa, I said gently. There's nothing wrong with that. You couldn't help everyone. But family, Carmen started. I'm fine, really. And now I can make sure other students get opportunities too. Carmen pulled me into a hug, whispering apologies I didn't think she owed. When she released me, Uncle Richard squeezed my shoulder, his jaw tight with emotion. They moved on to congratulate my parents, and I found myself alone for a moment near the windows. The campus spread out below, brick buildings with ivy-covered walls, students lounging on the quad, the library where I'd spent countless hours. 4 years compressed into a single view. My phone buzzed. I'd been ignoring it all afternoon, but curiosity got the better of me. Text messages flooded the screen. Old classmates from high school, distant relatives, former co-workers from Morrison's diner, even Mr. Morrison himself. So proud of you, kid. You've come so far. And one message that made my stomach clench. From Vanessa. We need to talk, privately. I stared at those 5 words, trying to decode the intention behind them. Was this an olive branch? Another confrontation? Vanessa's messages were usually either demands or criticisms, rarely anything in between. Before I could respond, Mom appeared again. Mija, your father's getting tired. I think we should head home soon. Are you coming to the house? I'd been planning to spend the evening with my parents, celebrating quietly. But Vanessa's message nagged at me. Yes, I said. I'll be there. Just give me 20 minutes to wrap things up here. Mom kissed my cheek and went to collect Dad. I watched them leave together, Dad moving slowly but steadily, Mom matching his pace without making it obvious. They'd faced so much in the past 2 years: the stroke, the financial strain, the fear of losing everything they'd built. Through it all, they'd never stopped supporting me. I typed a response to Vanessa. When and where? The reply came within seconds. Tonight. My apartment. 8 p.m. Come alone. The message felt ominous, like something from a crime thriller. But this was my sister, dramatic as always. Whatever she wanted to say, she'd apparently decided it couldn't wait. I gathered my things, the diploma in its leather folder, the honor cords draped over my arm, the stack of business cards I'd collected from people whose names I'd already forgotten. As I headed toward the exit, I caught my reflection in one of the ballroom's ornate mirrors. Same person I'd been this morning. Same face, same body, same doubts lurking behind my eyes. But somehow, everything was different now. The girl in the mirror was a philanthropist. A success story. Someone who'd made it against the odds and given back. I wasn't sure I recognized her yet, but I was about to find out if Vanessa did. The house smelled like Mom's famous enchiladas when I arrived at 6:30. The scent hit me the moment I opened the front door. Cumin, chili powder, melted cheese, and the corn tortillas she always made from scratch. It was the smell of home, of celebration, of every milestone our family had ever marked together. "In here, mija," Mom called from the kitchen. I found her at the stove, stirring a pot of rice, still wearing her dress from the ceremony, but with an apron tied over it. Dad sat at the kitchen table, his medications laid out in front of him in their daily organizer, the colorful pill case that tracked his blood thinners, blood pressure medication, and the supplements his physical therapist recommended. "You didn't have to cook," I said, though I was secretly relieved she had. The reception had served fancy hors d'oeuvres, tiny portions on oversized plates that looked beautiful but left everyone hungry. Of course I cooked. "It's your graduation day." Mom turned from the stove, her eyes still slightly puffy from crying. Besides, I needed something to do with my hands. If I sat still, I'd just keep replaying that moment when they called your name. She crossed the kitchen and hugged me again, tighter than before. $42 million, she whispered. "Amelia, I still can't believe it." "The endowment will generate returns," I explained, pulling back to look at her. "The university will use the income from investing that money to fund the scholarships. It's designed to last forever." I know. Dr. Aldridge explained all of that when we talked to him after the ceremony." Mom wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. "But baby, that was your money. Your security. What if you need it someday?" This was the conversation I'd been avoiding. The one where I had to explain that I still had money, enough to live comfortably for years even without working. That the donation, massive as it was, hadn't left me destitute. "Mom, I'm okay. I promise. I kept enough for myself." "How much is enough?" Dad spoke up from the table, his words careful and measured the way they always were now. Speech didn't come as easily after the stroke, so he chose his words with precision. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "I have a little over $3 million in investments. Plus the job offers I mentioned, any one of those would pay me well into 6 figures annually. I'm not going to struggle. $3 million. The number sounded absurd coming out of my mouth, like I was talking about someone else's life. Dad studied my face, his dark eyes sharp despite the fatigue lingering around them. "You feel guilty. It wasn't a question." "Maybe," I admitted. "A little. While you and Mom were dealing with medical bills, I had millions of dollars sitting in investment accounts." "You paid off the medical debt," Dad pointed out. "Every penny. That check you gave us last year. We thought it came from your salary at Meridian. You said it was a signing bonus." I lied. The admission felt necessary, like lancing a wound to let the poison out. "I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth." Mom brought 3 plates to the table, loaded with enchiladas, rice, and refried beans. She sat down heavily, suddenly looking exhausted. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. "Were you ashamed?" "No, God, no. It wasn't a shame." I struggled to articulate the tangle of emotions I'd been carrying for 2 years. It was fear, I think. Fear that money would change things between us. That you'd see me differently or treat me differently. That it would create this distance. "Like it did with Vanessa," Dad said quietly. There it was. The elephant that had been sitting at our table for years, invisible but impossible to ignore. "Vanessa's different," I said carefully. "She called an hour ago." Mom picked up her fork but didn't eat. She wanted to know if we knew. About the money, about the donation. She seemed— Mom searched for the right word. Angry isn't quite right. Hurt, maybe? "She's embarrassed," I said flatly. "She spent this morning mocking my car and my life, and then found out I donated more money than she'll probably make in her entire career." "That's not fair, Amelia." Mom's tone carried a warning. "Vanessa works hard." "I know she does. I'm not saying she doesn't." I took a breath, trying to organize my thoughts. "But she's built her entire identity around being the successful one. The one who went to the better school, got the better job, married the rich guy. And now that's been challenged." Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand with his good one. "You challenged nothing. You lived your life. You made choices. Her reaction is not your responsibility." "She wants to meet tonight," I said, "at her apartment. 8 o'clock. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that came from 30 years of marriage. "Do you want to go?" Mom asked. "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should. She's my sister. But another part remembers every time she's made me feel small, every comparison, every subtle dig. What if tonight is just more of the same?" "Then you leave," Dad said simply. "You don't owe her your time if she uses it to hurt you." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The enchiladas were perfect, the right amount of spice, the cheese melted just so. Mom had made my favorite version with green chili sauce instead of red. "I saw Carmen and Richard at the reception," I said eventually. "They seemed upset that they didn't help me financially." Mom sighed. "Carmen has been calling me all afternoon. She's devastated. She keeps saying they should have known, should have asked, should have done something. It's not their fault. They helped Vanessa. That was generous. They helped Vanessa because Richard and your uncle." Mom stopped herself, pressing her lips together. "Because what?" I prompted. "Because Richard's business partner is Vanessa's godfather," Mom said finally. "They've known the family for years. It was natural for them to take an interest in her education." "You—" She trailed off. "I wasn't as close to them," I finished. It was true. Aunt Carmen had always been kind, but we'd never had the same relationship she shared with Vanessa. Different personalities, different interests. It wasn't personal, just the way families sometimes fractured along invisible lines. "Still," Mom said, "they feel terrible. Carmen wants to contribute to your scholarship fund. She doesn't need to do that. I think she needs to feel like she's helping. Let her, Mia. Let people help if they want to." I nodded, understanding what Mom was really saying. My donation had created ripples that extended beyond the university. It had forced people to examine their own choices, their own generosity or lack thereof. That wasn't my intention, but intentions didn't always control outcomes. After dinner, I helped Mom clean up while Dad retreated to his recliner in the living room. Through the doorway, I could see him with his eyes closed, but I knew he wasn't sleeping. He was processing, the way he always did after big events. "What are you going to say to her?" Mom asked quietly, handing me a plate to dry. "To Vanessa? I have no idea." "Be kind," Mom urged. "Whatever she says, whatever she does, be kind. She's struggling with something right now, even if she won't admit it. I'll try." But as I dried the last plate and checked my phone, 7:15 p.m., 45 minutes until I had to face my sister, I wondered if kindness would be enough. Vanessa had spent our entire lives competing with me, even when I wasn't competing back. Now she'd lost a competition she didn't know we were having, and I had no idea what she'd do with that defeat. I grabbed my keys, kissed my parents goodbye, and headed toward a conversation I suspected would change everything between us. One way or another, Vanessa's apartment complex was in the Riverside Heights district, where modern luxury buildings had sprouted up in the last 5 years. Glass and steel towers with names like the Meridian and skyline residences that catered to young professionals with 6-figure incomes and a taste for granite countertops. She lived on the 14th floor of a building called Azure West. I'd Been here twice before, once for her housewarming party 2 years ago, and once last Thanksgiving when she'd insisted on hosting dinner in her spacious apartment that turned out to be barely big enough for 6. People around the table. The lobby smelled like expensive candles and had the kind of minimalist furniture that looked uncomfortable and probably cost more than my first car. I signed in with the doorman, a security feature Vanessa loved to mention whenever she talked about her building, and took the elevator up. The hallway on the 14th floor was carpeted in plush gray, absorbing the sound of my footsteps. I found apartment 1407 and knocked. Vanessa opened the door immediately, like she'd been waiting right there. She'd changed out of her ceremony outfit into black yoga pants and an oversized sweater, the kind of calculated casual that rich people wore to look effortlessly put together. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, making her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The apartment looked exactly as I remembered it. Open concept living room and kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Furniture from West Elm arranged just so. Everything white and gray and carefully curated. A place that looked like it belonged in a magazine but felt like nobody actually lived there. Bradley was nowhere in sight. "Where's Bradley?" I asked, settling onto the edge of her pristine white couch. "I sent him to his parents' house." Vanessa remained standing, arms crossed over her chest. "I told you to come alone. This conversation is between us." "Okay." I waited, letting her set the pace. This was her meeting, her territory, her agenda. She paced to the windows, stared out at the city for a long moment, then turned back to face me. "I need to understand something. When did you know? When did you know you had that kind of money?" 2 years ago, when Meridian Logistics bought the patent. 2 years. She said it like an accusation. "You've known for 2 years that you were a millionaire, and you never said a word. Not to me, not to Mom and Dad, not to anyone." "I told the university," I pointed out. "Obviously. The donation didn't materialize out of nowhere. Don't be cute, Amelia. You know what I mean." Vanessa's voice rose slightly. "Every family dinner, every holiday, every time Mom mentioned how tight money was or how worried she was about Dad's medical bills, you sat there and said nothing. I paid off their medical debt. They just didn't know where the money came from. Because you lied to them. You told them it was a signing bonus from Meridian." Vanessa threw her hands up. "Do you understand how that makes the rest of us look? Carmen and Richard are falling over themselves, apologizing for not helping you through school. I've spent the last 6 hours fielding calls from relatives who want to know why I didn't tell them my little sister was rich. As if I knew. As if you trusted me enough to share that information." There it was. Not anger about the money itself, but about being left out. About not knowing something that apparently everyone else would now know. "I didn't tell anyone," I said calmly. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want it to change things." "Well, congratulations. Everything's changed anyway." Vanessa's laugh was bitter. "Do you know what Bradley's mother said to me at the reception?" She said, "Your sister is quite accomplished. You must be so proud. Do you know how that felt? His mother has spent 2 years treating me like I'm lucky Bradley chose me. Like I'm not good enough for her precious son. And today, she looked at me like I was the disappointing sibling." I felt a pang of sympathy despite myself. "I'm sure she didn't mean—" "Don't!" Vanessa cut me off. "Don't tell me what she meant. You don't know what it's like to constantly be measured against someone else's success." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. "Vanessa, you've been measuring me against your success since we were kids. Every achievement I had, you found a way to diminish it. Every struggle I faced, you used it to feel superior. That's not true. This morning, you mocked my car. You called me a scholarship baby like it was an insult. You've spent years making sure I knew you were doing better than me." My voice remained steady, but the words carried weight. "And now you're upset because the scoreboard flipped?" Vanessa's face flushed. I didn't," she stopped, regrouping. "I worked hard for everything I have. My job, this apartment, my relationship with Bradley. I earned it. I never said you didn't. But you're implying I only got it because of Uncle Richard's connections. Because Aunt Carmen paid my tuition. Because I had it easy. Did you? The question came out sharper than I intended. Have it easy? Vanessa stared at me. You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under. Living up to everyone's expectations. Being the perfect daughter, the successful niece, the woman Bradley's family would approve of. Do you know how exhausting it is to always be on? No, I admitted. I don't. Because I've spent the last 4 years trying to survive, not worrying about whether I was living up to anyone's image of perfection. The silence that followed was heavy. Vanessa moved to the couch and sat down, suddenly deflated. She looked smaller somehow, like the fight had drained out of her. I'm jealous, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Is that what you want to hear? I'm jealous of you, my little sister, who I've been condescending to for years. You did something incredible. You created something that mattered, that changed people's lives, and you did it while working 3 jobs and maintaining perfect grades. Meanwhile, I've been coasting on connections and privilege, and convincing myself that I'm the successful one. The admission hung in the air between us. I'd expected anger, accusations, maybe even more mockery. But not this, not vulnerability. You are successful, I said carefully. Your career, your relationship, those are real achievements, Vanessa. They don't stop being valuable just because I did something different. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I'm serious. I leaned forward. What I did, the algorithm, the patent sale, that was luck as much as skill. I happened to notice a problem, happened to have the knowledge to solve it, and happened to meet the right people at the right time. None of that diminishes what you've built. But you gave away $42 million. Vanessa's eyes glistened. To help people. To make a difference. What have I done that matters? What have I contributed to the world besides making rich people's marketing campaigns slightly more effective? This was deeper than sibling rivalry. This was an existential crisis dressed up as jealousy. You have time to figure out what matters to you, I said. You're 26, Vanessa. Your life isn't over. If you want to do something meaningful, do it. But don't measure your worth against mine. We're not in competition, aren't we? She wiped her eyes roughly. We've always been in competition. That's what sisters do. Maybe that's what we've been doing. But it doesn't have to be what we keep doing. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke again, her voice was small, uncertain. I don't know how to not compete with you. I don't know what we are if we're not... this. The honesty broke something open in my chest. For the first time in years, I saw my sister not as an adversary, but as someone equally lost, equally trying to figure out who she was supposed to be. Maybe we could try being sisters, I suggested softly. Just sisters, no scorekeeping. Vanessa met my eyes, and for the first time all day, she really looked at me. Not at my achievements or my donation or my stupid car. Just me. I don't know if I can do that, she admitted. Okay, I said, but maybe we could try. I left Vanessa's apartment around 10 o'clock. We hadn't solved everything. Years of complicated sibling dynamics couldn't be untangled in a single conversation. But something had shifted. The armor we'd both been wearing had cracked just enough to let a little light through. Before I left, Vanessa had asked one more question. What are you going to do now? I'd told her the truth. I didn't know. The city looked different as I drove home. Same streets, same buildings, but everything felt changed. Maybe it was the events of the day catching up with me. Or maybe it was the realization that the life I'd been planning, take a job, work my way up, slowly build a career, no longer fit the reality I was living. My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. The screen showed a California number I didn't recognize. Hello? Amelia Hernandez? The voice was male, professional, with a slight accent I couldn't place. I apologize for calling so late. My name is Dr. Kwame Osi. I'm the director of the Technology and Social Impact Initiative at Stanford University. Stanford. My brain took a moment to catch up. I was at Riverside's graduation ceremony today, Dr. Osi continued. I came to recruit some of our top engineering prospects, but I ended up witnessing something far more interesting. Your donation and the story behind your algorithm. That's exactly the kind of innovation our program focuses on. Technology that solves real problems for real people. I pulled into a parking spot but didn't turn off the engine. I'm sorry, you said you're from Stanford? Yes, we run a fellowship program for recent graduates who want to continue developing solutions for social good. It's a 2-year position. You'd have access to our labs, mentorship from faculty, and funding to pursue new projects. Given your background and what you've already accomplished, I think you'd be an excellent fit. I'd have to think about that. Of course. I'll send you information via email. But Amelia, he paused, what you did today, creating that endowment, that shows a commitment to impact that goes beyond profit. We need more engineers like you. Engineers who remember where they came from and use their skills to lift others up. After we hung up, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the dashboard. Stanford. A fellowship. 2 more years of school, essentially, but focused on building things that mattered. 3 weeks ago, I'd been planning to take a corporate job in Austin, work my way up the ladder, and call it success. Now I had options I'd never imagined. 3 months later, I stood in the empty shell of what would become the Hernandez Innovation Center. Construction workers moved around us as Dr. Nguyen walked me through the architectural plans spread across a makeshift table. The ground floor will house the maker spaces, she explained, pointing to the blueprints. 3D printers, laser cutters, electronics labs, everything students need to prototype their ideas. The second floor is dedicated to research labs. The third floor will be collaborative workspaces and meeting rooms. I traced my finger along the design, still struggling to believe this was real. A building. With my name on it. When will it be finished? I asked. 18 months if everything stays on schedule. You'll have to come back for the ribbon cutting. I will. I'd accepted the Stanford Fellowship, much to my parents' mixed emotions. Mom was proud but worried about me being so far from home. Dad had simply said, go learn, go build, go make a difference. Vanessa's reaction had surprised me most. She'd called the day after I told the family, her voice cautious but genuine. Stanford's lucky to have you. And Amelia, I'm sorry it took me so long to say this, but I'm proud of you. It wasn't a complete transformation. We still had awkward moments and still fell into old patterns occasionally. But we were trying. She'd even asked if she could visit me in California once I got settled. Small steps. Have you met any of the scholarship recipients yet? Dr. Nguyen asked, pulling me back to the present. I'm meeting them next week. The first cohort of 50. That was the part that made this real, knowing that 50 students were starting at Riverside this fall without the weight of financial anxiety I'd carried. They could focus on learning, on exploring, on becoming whoever they were meant to be. One of them was a young woman from El Paso named Sofia Martinez. She'd sent me an email through the scholarship program, telling me she was the first in her family to attend college, that her mother cleaned houses and her father worked construction, that this scholarship meant she wouldn't have to choose between helping her family and pursuing her education. Reading her message, I cried, because I saw myself in her words, in her gratitude, in her determination to make the opportunity count. You've changed lives, Amelia, Dr. Nguyen said softly. I hope you know that. I gave them money, I replied. They're the ones who'll change their own lives. You gave them the possibility. That's worth more than you know. My going-away party was held at Morrison's Diner, the same place where the algorithm had first taken shape. Mr. Morrison closed early and let us take over the main dining room. My parents came, along with a handful of close friends from Riverside, Dr. Nguyen and Dr. Okafor. Even Rebecca Winters from Catalyst Ventures showed up, still trying to convince me to start a company someday. Vanessa and Bradley arrived fashionably late, carrying a gift bag. You didn't have to bring anything, I said as Vanessa handed it to me. Just open it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the kind with thick cream-colored pages. On the first page, Vanessa had written in her neat handwriting, "For all the ideas that come next. Love your sister." I looked up at her, blinking back unexpected tears. I thought you could use it, Vanessa said, shrugging like it was no big deal. But her eyes told a different story. Thank you, I managed. Bradley clapped me on the shoulder. Stanford doesn't know what it's getting into. You're going to turn that place upside down. As the evening wore on, Mr. Morrison brought out a cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite since I'd started working there freshman year. Someone had written, "Congratulations, Amelia," across the top in blue icing. Dad stood up to make a toast, his movements still careful but his voice strong. "My daughter," he began, and immediately his voice cracked. He took a breath, steadying himself. "My daughter taught me something important this year. She taught me that success isn't about how much you have. It's about what you do with what you've been given. Amelia could have kept that money. She could have bought fancy cars and big houses and all the things people think they need to be happy. Instead, she gave it away. She gave it to people who need it more. That's not just smart. That's wisdom." He raised his glass of water. "Doctor's orders, no alcohol." To Amelia, "Who makes us all want to be better people?" To Amelia, everyone echoed. I smiled through tears, looking around at the faces of people who'd supported me, challenged me, loved me through everything. This wasn't how I'd imagined my graduation summer would go. I'd thought I'd be starting a job, settling into a routine, maybe getting my own apartment. Instead, I headed to California to continue learning, to keep building, to figure out what else was possible. On my last night in Texas, I drove to Riverside University one more time. The campus was quiet in the summer evening. Most students went for a break. I parked near the engineering building where I'd spent so many late nights, then walked to the construction site. The foundation was already poured for the Hernandez Innovation Center. Steel beams marked where walls would eventually rise. It didn't look like much yet, just concrete and metal and ambition, but I could see it. The finished building, students streaming through the doors, ideas being born in the makerspaces, problems being solved in the research labs, 50 students each year who wouldn't have to work 3 jobs just to survive. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia Martinez, the scholarship recipient from El Paso. "Moving into the dorms tomorrow. I can't believe this is real. Thank you for making my dream possible." I typed back, "You made it possible. I just helped open the door. Now go do amazing things." Because that was the truth. I hadn't saved anyone. I just removed some obstacles. What they did with that opportunity, that was up to them. The sun was setting behind the campus, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I stood there for a few more minutes, saying goodbye to the place that had shaped me, challenged me, and ultimately launched me toward something bigger than I'd imagined. 4 years ago, I'd arrived at Riverside with a scholarship, a beat-up Toyota, and no idea what was coming. Now I was leaving with a degree, an endowment fund, a building with my name on it, and a sister who was finally starting to feel like family. Not bad for a scholarship baby. I smiled at the thought, remembering Vanessa's voice from graduation morning, mocking, superior, certain of her place in the world. We'd both learned something since then. Success wasn't about who had more. It was about what you built with what you had, and I was just getting started. Sometimes the people who underestimate us teach us the most important lessons, not about them, but about ourselves. Vanessa's mockery hadn't broken me. If anything, it had crystallized something I already knew, that true success isn't measured in designer handbags or luxury cars, but in the impact we make and the doors we open for others. The Hernandez Innovation Center would stand for decades, maybe centuries. Long after I was gone, students would walk through those doors, build their dreams in those labs, and launch their futures from that foundation. That was a legacy. That was what mattered. And as for that beat-up 2008 Toyota Corolla, I kept it. Even after I could afford any car I wanted, I kept it. Because it reminded me where I'd started, what I'd overcome, and why I'd chosen to give rather than take. Some people drive Mercedes to feel successful. I drove a Toyota to remember what success actually means. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.